He hasn't won a damn thing since 2016. Three-time loser.
Last night, CNN held a town hall with Chris Christie, who, yes, is running to become the Republican nominee. Now, of course, the biggest hurdle to that is Donald Trump, which goes to why he spent most of his time during this town hall just trashing Trump. And really, his campaign so far, I collected a bunch of clips last week I never actually used for a video because I covered some other stuff, but every single time this guy's on TV now, he is trashing Trump. And I'm really enjoying it. Even though, let's be clear, Christie, also not a good person. He attached himself to Trump back in 2016. He tried to become Trump's AG. Anyways, Christie, just your typical politician in that sense, just trying to fight for more and more power. But in this primary, it is just refreshing to see a Republican in this race willing to trash Trump openly and not dance around it. So that alone, I think, sets Christie apart from anybody else, minus, of course, Trump. But before I even get to the first clip, and I'm going to show 4 different highlights that I think stood out from that town hall. This is going on right now. Trump pleads not guilty to, even though he's guilty, Trump pleads not guilty to federal charge that he illegally kept classified documents at Florida Estate. And Christie's going to touch on this in one of the clips as well. This is, of course, big news right now that he's, being arrested again. So I think here he is on his way to, I believe, the courthouse. Anyways, a lot of live coverage right now. It's a big spectacle. But you could argue so is this town hall. So here is the first clip where Christie discusses here how every other candidate is so afraid of Donald Trump.
I just want to understand the other candidates who won't even mention his name. I watched that Joni Ernst roast and ride thing. It was like he was Voldemort from Harry Potter. Like nobody wanted to mention his name. Someone who's leading backwards and looking backwards. Like, say his name, man, say his name, right? I mean, how do you beat someone if you won't talk about them? How do you beat them if you won't distinguish yourself from them? I think, like I said before, they're playing politics. The second one is some of them are afraid. They're afraid of him. Look what he does, right? I got a nickname now. I never got one all through 16. I got one now, which is really nice. Makes me feel even more important. I'm just telling you, I've known him for 22 years. The only thing he understands is force. The only thing he understands is coming right at him and making your case. And if these other candidates don't want to do it, the American people and Republican primary voters have to start to understand this. When did we get to the point where we're always blaming our adversaries for the weakness of our candidates? Oh, it's the Democrats' fault. It's DOJ's fault. It's this person's fault. It's the media's fault. How about it's his? He hasn't won a damn thing since 2016. Three-time loser. 2018, we lost the House. 2020, we lost the White House. We lost the United States Senate a couple of weeks later in 2021. And in 2022, we lost 2 more governorships, another Senate seat, and barely took the House of Representatives when Joe Biden had the most incompetent first 2 years I've ever seen in my life. Loser, loser, loser. Now we're going, it'll be different this time. Why? Why will it be different this time?
This is just so good. And I'm going to get to the next clip, which is on Christie discussing the new indictment about the documents. But just from a purely scientific perspective, I find this campaign to be fascinating because we're going to find out just how much support an anti-Trump Republican candidate, a vocally anti-Trump Republican candidate, can get in a primary. This is not like any other campaign. Even if there are other people who are lesser known that are maybe criticizing Trump occasionally out in the open, they don't have the charisma that I think Chris Christie has. Chris Christie is a great orator. He is very well spoken. So that in combination with some actual facts here around Donald Trump, at least, again, not his whole campaign, but around Donald Trump, it's really a breath of fresh air. And it's going to be so interesting to see how much support he can get, because we're really going to find out, is there still a contingent of Republican voters that don't support Trump at all, that are going to vote for somebody who really is the anti-Trump candidate? I would love for this primary to come down to Chris Christie and Donald Trump. That would be an actual enjoyable fight to watch. DeSantis is very boring. Even apart from his from DeSantis being afraid to go after Trump. He's just boring. He's a terrible campaigner. He does not have charisma. I really feel like DeSantis is going to fizzle out, maybe even quicker than some people have suspected, because his launch so far has been terrible. And since he has announced his run, he has not seen a real bump in the polls since before he even was officially running. So to remain the same after announcing, I think is a bit of a red flag there. But let's get to Christie's next clip here, where he is discussing the latest indictment on Donald Trump.
If at any point before the search in August of 22, he had just done what anyone I suspect in this audience would have done, which is say, all right, you're serious? You're serving a grand jury subpoena? Let me just give the documents back. He wouldn't have been charged. Wouldn't have been charged with anything, even though he had kept them for almost a year and a half.
None of this had to happen.
None of this would happen. This is all him saying, again, it's what I was saying at the top. He's saying, I'm more important than the country. These are my papers. He saw it in the indictment. His employees were scared. They always call them his boxes. His boxes. He wants his boxes near him. He flew the boxes up to New Jersey for summer vacation. What is this, like they're a family member? I mean, seriously, I got to have my boxes with me. And let me ask you a question. What exactly was he doing with them? Did someone remind him he's not the president anymore? You don't need these things anymore. This is vanity run amok, Anderson. Run amok. Ego run amok. And he is now going to put this country through this when we didn't have to go through it. Everyone's blaming the prosecutors. He did it. It's his conduct.
You know him very well.
Yes.
Why do you think he did it? I mean,
he cannot live with the fact that he lost to Joe Biden. He can't live with it. And look, I watched the way Joe Biden's performing. I'd be pretty bummed out too if I'd lost to Joe Biden. But the fact is he did. And he wants to continue to pretend he's president. He wants the trappings of the presidency around him. And I think one of those trappings is these documents that he can wave around to people as they detail in the indictment. This is secret. I can't show you. I might have been able to show you, but now I can't. But this is what it's about. I had someone call me right after the raid last August and say, you know him so well. Like, is he trying to sell these things to a foreign government? Is he trying to blackmail someone? I said, oh, for God's sake, stop. This is just to show off.
So I love this clip because this really gives you a window into how Donald Trump thinks. Christie worked with him for years. He's known him for decades. I think this, and I do think Chris Christie's being honest here. This gives you a window into just how petty Donald Trump is, how egotistical he is. And it perfectly matches who we know Trump to be. He's incredibly embarrassed that he lost to Joe Biden, which is why he is still denying the results of the election. But it also goes to why he carries these documents around, so that he can feel important, so that he can meet with people and be like, oh, look what I have, these secret documents, which he, in the indictment, he did that with journalists. So he uses these documents, carries them around, has denied giving them back because he wants to use them as a prop so that he can feel more important than he actually is. How embarrassing is that? Like, imagine this is the guy you support. Imagine Donald Trump is the guy you support. You are supporting a child. And he's still the leader in the Republican Party. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of people feeling like Trump is their leader, is the best person to be a president. This child. It's unbelievable. And the next clip is going to get into how Republicans think about Trump and why they dance around the facts with him as well.
A number of prominent Republicans have been reluctant to talk about the substance of actually what's in. I know you've noticed, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He tweeted, quote, "The weaponization of federal law enforcement represents a mortal threat to a free society." Why do you think they're not addressing what's actually in the indictment?
Because it's indefensible. And they're playing games. Look, you all need to know this. They're playing political games with you because they think if you kind of like Trump a little bit, and I don't say anything bad about Trump, and then Trump kind of implodes and goes away, then you're more likely to vote for me. How about we do this? How about you decide who is the most honest, forthright leader who has common sense and will put you first. And let's put that person behind the desk in the Oval Office.
All right. So I'm going to get to the honesty aspect of this with Christie in a second here, because I can't let him just throw that out there and me not criticize him for it. But on this thought, or this fact that Republican candidates dance around criticizing Trump because they want his support base. Look, we all know this already, right? But to hear it from a Republican candidate in the primary is great. It's just, it's great to hear this straight from the horse's mouth. That of course, this is why Republican candidates are afraid to criticize Trump. Because in their minds, they're thinking, well, as long as I pretend he doesn't exist, don't say his name, there's a chance that maybe I won't offend his supporters, so that if Trump is put behind bars and can't physically run for president, then maybe I have a shot at getting his support because I didn't criticize him. It is purely political games. But on that point of political games and honesty, because Christie wants you to support someone who's going to be honest, who's going to fight for you. Chris Christie is one of the most petty politicians, national politicians to ever exist. So, Bridgegate, massive scandal. A top Christie aide got 13 months in prison for Bridgegate. Calls her former boss, the ex-governor, a bully. Going on to, CNN writes here, fighting back tears, Kelly, the person that went to prison for this, says, quote, "The truth will be heard, and for the former governor, that truth will be unescapable, regardless of lucrative television deals or even future campaigns. I plan to make sure of that." Kelly was convicted in 2016 for her role in a scheme to punish Mark Sokolich, the mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey, for not endorsing Christie's 2013 re-election bid. Before I even continue this paragraph here, Chris Christie. Now, he denies that he directed his staff to do this, though they clearly feel a little differently about that. But he shut down a bridge to punish a mayor who didn't endorse him. That's how petty Chris Christie is. The idea that he would put people above himself is absurd. The only difference is Christie's a little more intelligent, maybe, about how he goes about his attacks on other people. Unlike Trump, it's out in the open, it's clear. You know what you're getting. With Chris Christie, it's a lot of scheming behind the scenes. So Kelly and others misused Port Authority resources to close several lanes leading to the George Washington Bridge and thus caused severe traffic issues in the town, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. And Christie was smart enough to not have his fingerprints directly on this. So he didn't face any charges, but the people that worked for him did. Not to mention Christie's lack of honesty on other issues, like on climate change, which I guess to his credit, he says is real, but not a crisis. Even though Chris Christie knows otherwise. Now, this is back in 2015. Maybe he's evolved his views. I haven't seen. I mean, his campaign so far has been basically just attacking Trump. So I'm not sure if he's been asked a question about climate change yet, but I would be shocked if he had any real substantial plan to address it. Not to mention, of course, marijuana is a good issue to always bring up to see where lawmakers stand, because the facts are clear. It's been clear for decades and decades. Yet Chris Christie would be happy to enforce a federal ban. So again, going to the lack of honesty in Chris Christie. While it's good to see him criticize Trump, I'm not going to let this guy go for all his bullshit either. Last clip here. This is on whether or not he thinks Donald Trump is going to appear in the debates.
One, I'm not afraid of him. And two, it's the truth.
Do you think he'll show up to those early debates?
You bet he will. His ego will not be able to stop him. Or if he skips the first one, that'll be fine. Let him skip the first one. That'll give me absolute free lane. We'll do that once, Anderson. He'll be at the second one.
I think Chris Christie has a good prediction here, because Trump apparently has said he wants to skip the debates. I think he will skip, or at least likely skip the first one. But if Christie's on stage just hammering Trump for that entire debate, or as long as he's allowed to talk, because we know how these debates work. But if he has enough time to really go after Trump, I can't imagine Trump skipping the next one. I think he'll want to be on that stage to hit back. So it's, again, goes to his ego. Donald Trump, yes, he can cry all he wants on Truth Social, but he wants the spotlight. He wants to be able to stand there and attack others. And I have a hard time believing he will avoid all the debates because he loves so much being in the spotlight. But we're going to see. This campaign, for me personally, is the most enjoyable one to watch because of the obvious. Christie going after Trump directly, not holding back. The entire campaign is an anti-Trump campaign so far. It's been very fun to watch. We saw what Christie did to Marco Rubio back in 2016, ended his career or his campaign. Couldn't touch Trump, but we're going to see if this has any legs at all. My prediction is no, because Republican voters are so attached to Trump. Christie is no longer a relevant figure for Republican voters. I don't see him getting much more than 2, 3, 4, 5% maybe. But I hope I'm wrong, because again, if this comes down to Christie and Trump, then we are in for one entertaining fight.